when the skeletal remains of 22 years old, Caitlin Markham were found 2 years after she went missing in a wooded area in rural Cedar Grove, Indiana, 30 miles away from her Fairfield home. Authorities, who were initially racking their brains on what could have happened to her, then began to ask questions on who killed Caitlin Markham. Over the years, detectives did all they could to solve the mystery behind her murder, following every lead. Finally, after 12 years, the Caitlin Markham's cold case has been solved and her killer arrested. Caitlin Helene Markham was born on the 16th of August 1990 in Hamilton County, Ohio. Growing up, Caitlin Markham would always light up a room with her bubbly personality. Her family members described her as a light who was warm and showed compassion to others. In a documentary about her death, her younger sister Allie said, "Caitlin always took care of me. Her bubbly and spirit-free nature made family and friends compare her to a butterfly. She grew up loving everything arts." Caitlin pretty much had her life planned out before college. At 22 years old, she was wrapping up her undergraduate studies from the Art Institute of Cincinnati in Ohio, and she was already engaged to be married. Caitlin, who was saving up money to move to Colorado with her fiancé immediately after marriage, had 2 jobs. She worked at her campus bookstore and at David's Bridal. Sadly, her bright future would not come to stay as horror struck 2 days to her 22nd birthday. Around 9 p.m. at night, on the 13th of August 2011, Caitlin Markham arrived home to her apartment in Fairfield after her work shift was over at the bridal shop. On getting home, she was met with her fiancé, John Carter, who was already there waiting for her return. Later that evening, a friend of Caitlin also came over to hang out with the couple, but she ended up leaving after she sensed the tension between Caitlin and John. The friend noticed that Caitlin seemed quiet. She asked John why the couple were acting weird, and John said it was due to magic mushrooms that he and Caitlin had taken. Later that evening, according to John Carter, he left Caitlin's condo to meet up with some friends for a bonfire at 11 p.m. Caitlin Markham, who stayed back home, was said to have been reportedly annoyed with John Carter for leaving. By the following day, Caitlin Markham had mysteriously vanished overnight from her apartment with no trace. Around 8 p.m., John Carter, who visited her to check if she was okay since she wasn't picking up his calls or replying his messages, called 911 and told the operator that his fiancée had gone missing. John Carter was heard saying, "My fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere. I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in a house by herself, so I'm really nervous. Her car is still there. I'd been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house and see if she was okay, and her car was still there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm like really freaking out." Officers from the Fairfield police then began an investigation into the case, searching for leads in Caitlin Markham's disappearance. Days after her disappearance, family, friends, and people who care came out in their hundreds, volunteering to search for Caitlin Markham around her home, her neighborhoods in Fairfield, the Art Institute, and the Tri-County Mall where she worked. But hours turned into days, days into months, and months into years. There was no sign of Caitlin Markham anywhere. Cell phone records showed she sent a final text that Carter reported in the early hours of August 14, 2011, at 12:52 a.m. Since that moment in time, investigators found no signs of cell phone or credit card activity. The first set of suspects were her family and friends. Since John Carter was the last person to see her alive, the investigators questioned him about the night he saw her last. John told the detectives that the last time he heard from Caitlin was when he was at the bonfire night. He said few minutes before 1 a.m., Caitlin had texted him a photo she liked that her boss had taken. When asked where he went after the bonfire, he told detectives that around 4 a.m., he went to his home, which he shared with his mother, and fell asleep. The next day, he said he sent Caitlin Markham a good morning text, but he never got a reply. By afternoon, Carter said unlike Caitlin, she still hadn't returned his text. By the end of the day, John claimed to have not heard from her, So he became worried and decided to go to her apartment to check on his fiancée. He said on getting to her house, her car was in the driveway. Her dog was inside, but Caitlin was nowhere to be found. He was asked if he and Caitlin had been having issues in their relationship, to which he replied, "Not at all." However, Caitlin's friend, Michelle, made a contrast to this. In fact, Michelle had told the media that Caitlin and John had a pretty heated argument just 2 days before her disappearance. According to Michelle, on August 12, 2011, John and Caitlin allegedly got into an argument about money issues. Despite their differences, the couple went to a festival at a nearby church that evening. According to Michelle, John and Caitlin's dispute spilled over onto the occasion. Caitlin eventually became upset and decided to leave the festival early. It's also conceivable that John and Caitlin made up before she disappeared. But as was already said, the couple appeared to be having some tension the next night as well. At Caitlin's condo, a friend chose to leave after getting the impression that the couple preferred to be by themselves. Many people at the time, including Caitlin's family, believed that John Carter had something to do with her disappearance. They disputed John Carter's claim that Caitlin's moody and unusual quiet behavior on the night her friend came to visit was because he and Caitlin had consumed magic mushrooms. They reasoned that since the friend came over around 15 minutes after Caitlin got home from work, it is not possible that she would start experiencing the effects of the mushrooms that rapidly, even if she had taken them as soon as she entered her condo. Some people, however, have questioned whether Caitlin even consumed the mushrooms in the first place. It seemed odd that she would want to experience the effects of mushrooms if she merely wanted to relax at home after a long day of work. She had just arrived home and was exhausted. The bonfire was another peculiar element of John's story that several people thought was weird. On August 13, at around 11 p.m., John claimed to have left Caitlin's condo to meet up with friends. He brought along a bag filled with Caitlin's documents, which he intended to burn at the bonfire. John clarified that Caitlin wanted to shred the papers rather than discard them, but she did not have a shredder. He then took the documents instead, intending to destroy them so she wouldn't have to worry about it. Although some people think this is an unusual justification for why he destroyed Caitlin's documents. At first, it didn't seem like too much of a stretch. It's possible that he really was doing Caitlin a favor by removing the papers from her house, because he admitted to the investigators that he frequently ran errands for her. However, some have generally questioned John's alibi. A handful of the friends John claimed to have been with that evening have provided contradictory accounts. Some others even assert that there wasn't even a bonfire that night. Even though there was a lot of speculation regarding John, it seems that gradually, the focus of the investigation shifted. John Carter had frequently addressed Caitlin's issue in the media over the years, and he has maintained his denial of any participation in her disappearance. On the 16th of August, 2011, 3 days after Caitlin's disappearance, John Carter mentioned being scared and concerned during one of the searches for his fiancée. In his words, he said, "I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I just want to find Caitlin and celebrate her birthday with her and go to Red Lobster like she was planning." He later stated that Caitlin was strong and would fight her way out if she is somewhere and is in a worst-case scenario. However, the search for Caitlin came to an end when, after many days, she wouldn't be found. The case went cold for nearly 2 years until on April 7, 2013, when a couple who was reportedly looking for scrap metal came across what appeared to be a grocery bag containing a human jaw and a skull with hair still attached to it. The couple would immediately call 911. In order to identify the remains of the victim, a Franklin County, Indiana coroner, Wanda Lee, used dental records which ultimately confirmed that the remains were Caitlin Markham's. Her death was then ruled a homicide, but her cause of death could not be determined. When the news of her death got to her family, they were unavoidably devastated to find out that she had been a victim of a homicide. They were also not overly shocked by the information. Her family held on to hope that she would be found safe when she first went missing. Their hopes faded as weeks turned into months without any trace of her. They eventually came to the conclusion that Caitlin had been murdered. On April 18, 2013, Caitlin Markham's family and friends gather for a celebration of life at Harbin Park, one of her favorite places. 4 months later, on the 25th of August 2013, her funeral was held at her alma mater, Fairfield High School. The room was decorated with many bright colors, just the way she would have loved it. Her fiancé, John Carter, was in tears as he spoke in front of the crowd and called Caitlin the love of his life. "We would have had our kiss. We would have had our marriage. We would have had our honeymoon. We would have had our kid. We would have had our life, and we would have grown old together," said John Carter. Since Caitlin Markham's remains were found in Indiana, the Indiana State Police joined in the investigation. In the years following the discovery of her remains, Caitlin Markham's family hired a private investigator to look into the case as well. Though the Fairfield Police and Indiana State Police had opened an investigation on the case, Caitlin's family reportedly felt enough resources were not being dedicated to her death. The Caitlin Markham's case grew to garner national attention over the years. In the year 2016, a documentary was made in her honor to celebrate her life. Her family and friends were featured in the 1-hour documentary, which was titled "Taken Too Soon: The Caitlin Markham Story." The documentary also got featured on a syndicated TV show named Crime Watch Daily. On Caitlin Markham's 27th birthday, her family and friends gathered at a Springdale, Ohio movie theater to watch the premiere of the documentary. Her family kept hope alive, believing that the documentary would bring answers to their daughter's murder case. Over the years, many rumors and theories, some fueled by social media, have surfaced as to what happened to Caitlin Markham. One theory stated that she died of a drug overdose, and those with her panicked, taking her body to Indiana and dumping it on a rural road in Franklin County. Other theories point to family and friends being responsible for her death, including her fiancé, John Carter. After a lot of investigation, Sheriff's detective announced that there was a suspect in the case, but a name was not mentioned. However, the arrest of Michael Strauss and his past life prompted speculation about the unsolved homicide of Caitlin Markham at the time. Police say Michael Strauss is responsible for the death of 23-year-old Ellen Week at his Liberty Township home. Michael Strauss was charged with murder after a body believed to be Ellen Week was found in a field on Milliken Road. Ellen Week was also said to have disappeared from her home like Caitlin did. Michael Strauss was considered a suspect in Caitlin Markham's case at the time because there were photos posted online which featured Michael Strauss, Caitlin Markham, and other friends. These photos suggested that Michael Strauss was an acquaintance of Caitlin Markham. As the investigation progresses, Michael Strauss was never pinned as Caitlin Markham's killer, having exhausted all leads. The reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Caitlin Markham's killer grew to $100,000 over the years. But despite the investigation on the case by multiple law enforcement agencies, her case remained unsolved for over a decade. However, there appeared to be a break on the 17th of February, 2023, when detectives arrested Jonathan Palmerton, a close friend to Caitlin Markham and a childhood friend to John Carter. Jonathan was arrested at his workplace, and prosecutors say he had lied in an interview in April 2022 during the investigation of Caitlin Markham's cold case. After a search warrant was filed for his home, investigators retrieved some incriminating evidence that suggested he lied in connection to Caitlin's murder. He was later charged with felony and perjury, and his bond was set at $50,000. Markham's father said Palmerton's arrest makes him hopeful, but he remains guarded as the case progresses. A month after Jonathan Palmerton was arrested for perjury, John Carter, Caitlin Markham's fiancé, was apprehended at his workplace as a suspect to her death. Investigators revealed discovering incriminating evidence at his home in Fairfield during a search. These evidence suggested John Carter as the suspect they have been looking for. John Carter appeared in court and pled not guilty. However, Butler County Prosecutor Mike G. Moser revealed new details in court about the discovery of Caitlin's body. He said there were a set of 3 or 4 sharp force wounds to Caitlin's left wrist. According to forensic report, the place where Caitlin Markham's body was ultimately found is probably not where the body was first deposited. During the argument for a high bond, G.M. Moser read writings that he said detectives found inside John Carter's mother's home during a recent search warrant. John Carter had lived in his mother's home at the time of Caitlin's death. One of the writings says, "Deep down, I love her. You want to kill her, but I love her. She must die. I can't kill her." Yes, you can. No, yes, how do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good, but you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right. About what? Nothing. It was as if John Carter was fighting and conversing with a demon. Other documents revealed in court stated that John Carter suffers from PTSD and depression. John Carter was placed on a $1 million bond, but posted bail on the 4th of April, 2023. He stood in court wearing only an ankle monitor after his $1 million cash bond. He was allowed to face the judge unshackled. His trial date is set for June 2024, and he will remain out of jail during that time. After John Carter was arrested, Caitlin's dad, Dave Markham, said, "It's not a surprise. I mean, I did suspect him all along. I think a lot of people, if not a vast majority of people, suspected him." Dave thinks John Carter's arrest could mean he and Allie may finally have justice for their daughter and sister's murder. Sonia Carmen Heroic Stone was born on the 27th of May, 1951. Sonia, who originally lived in Quebec, Canada, moved to the United States in the 1970s, where she afterwards got married to Michael Stone in 1976. The union produced a female child. However, Sonia's marriage to Michael Stone did not last long, as they both divorced and went their separate ways. In the year 1980, Sonia Carmen Stone was a single mother, living alone with her 4-year-old daughter, while she worked for the Levi Strauss Company. On October 15, 1981, Sonia took her daughter to school and ran a few errands before she returned home. Around 12 p.m., a lady named Caroline McBride, who was a friend to Sonia Carmen, visited her at home, after calling her multiple times and getting no response in return. On getting to the Carmel Point area of Monterey County, California, where Sonia lived, Caroline found the dead body of her friend, Sonia Carmen Heroic, just inside the front door that opened into her living room. 30 years old, Sonia Carmen Heroic appeared to have been sexually assaulted. She was spread out on the floor with her purse, and the content in it spilling close to her body. Sonia was half-dressed and had been strangled with a pair of her own pantyhose, which was found tightly wrapped around her neck. Her shirt and jacket were torn and pulled back. A terrified Caroline placed a call through to the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, who immediately dispatched officers to the crime scene. The investigators were of the opinion that the position where Sonia was found in her home suggested that she was attacked as soon as she opened her front door to go in. They also examined Sonia Carmen's body and discovered that she had a broken left ring fingernail with blood beneath it, which indicated that she had struggled with her killer, ultimately scratching him before her death. The question of who committed such heinous crime bugged the police and the family of Sonia Carmen Heroic for years. By the next day, in a bid to find answers, the police went about the neighborhood asking questions and interviewing those who responded to the knock on their doors. While in the neighborhood just across the street to Sonia Carmen's house, one of the detectives interviewed a neighbor whose name is Michael Scott Glazebrook. He was 25 years old at the time, and he had a 3 to 4 inch vertical scratch down his right cheek, which the detective noticed. The detective immediately asked him how and when he got the scratch. Glazebrook, however, made inconsistent statements. He told the detective he got it from cutting plexiglass in his garage, while he told his parents that he got it in a fight at Monterey Peninsula College, where he schooled. Due to his inconsistency, Michael Scott Glazebrook was charged with Sonia Carmen's death in 1982. But when the case went to trial in 1983, the jury came back with a 9-3 not guilty verdict, which made the district attorney's office decide not to retry the case, even though a retrial was possible, regardless of the jury's decision. Michael Scott was, however, discharged and acquitted. With no significant DNA technology in the 1970s, the case could not be pursued, and it went cold for 39 years. In the year 2020, detectives at the Monterey County Sheriff's Office and Deputy District Attorney Matt L. Hero re-examined the Sonia Carmen Stone's case. They found out that there were several pieces of evidence in Sonia's case file that could be now tested utilizing modern DNA technology. These pieces of evidence, including the DNA found under Sonia's broken fingernail and right breast, were sent to the Department of Justice DNA laboratory for testing. Since Michael Scott Glazebrook was the #1 suspect on the list of the investigators in 1981, detectives got a search warrant for a new sample of his DNA. They were able to obtain a new DNA profile easily because Michael Scott Glazebrook was still alive and works in Monterey County. After the DNA sample from Sonia Carmen Stone's crime scene was tested and compared with the DNA sample gotten from Michael Scott Glazebrook, it immediately came out as a match. Detectives then conducted surveillance at Michael Scott Glazebrook's residence in the city of Seaside. Around 8 p.m. on the 14th of August, 2021, Glazebrook drove away from his home. He was, however, stopped and taken into custody. In honor of Stone, all detectives wore Levi's jeans during the operation to arrest Michael Scott Glazebrook. After an 8-day jury trial in 2023, Glazebrook, who is now 67 years old, was convicted of the murder of Sonia Carmen Stone and will be sentenced in April, possibly facing a potential lifetime prison sentence without the possibility of parole. Following Glazebrook's convictions, Sonia Carmen Heroic Stone's daughter, who is now 44 years old, said, "It's been a day that we have been waiting for a really long time. Sonia was a wonderful woman, and we're so happy to see justice for her."
2-year-old Mary Agnes Maroney disappeared in the bustling city of Chicago on a chilly day in November 1930. Her disappearance baffled authorities for 93 years, and her family members were left devastated. This case of decades lost child is confusing. Mary Agnes Maroney's enigmatic disappearance made international news for years. False leads and pointless discoveries failed for almost a century to locate the child and reunite her with her family. But over time, the puzzle's pieces started to line up. Hello beautiful people, and welcome back to Mystery Detective, where we explore the depths of cold and solved cases, strange mysteries, and spooky stories that will keep you up at night. In today's video, we'll talk about the lengthy search for Mary Agnes Maroney, a 2-year-old who mysteriously disappeared from her Chicago home in 1930 and was never heard from again. Mary Agnes Maroney's case remained unsolved despite numerous DNA tests, suspicious letters, sighting reports, and reported sightings until 2023, when a Californian woman came forward with the solution to the long-standing puzzle. Stay with us as we reveal the shocking details surrounding Mary's disappearance and the surprising turn of events that resulted in the resolution of her case. Mary Agnes Maroney was born to Catherine and Michael Maroney in Chicago, Illinois, on May 9, 1928. In the depths of poverty during the Great Depression, they were a family struggling to get by. Mary had a younger sister named Anastasia, who was only 11 months old at the time. Mary and her family lived in an apartment on the second floor above a supermarket at 5200 Wentworth Avenue. Michael Maroney distributed handbills to earn his meager weekly salary of only $15. The Maroneys were having a difficult time. In the midst of their financial struggles, one of Catherine Maroney's relatives became interested in the family story. This relative took the initiative to get in touch with a welfare organization, and as a result, an advertisement about their financial struggles was publicized. Shortly after, Edgar Gilpin, a self-described male nurse and philanthropist, responded to the advertisement on May 13, 1930, on a Wednesday night. He offers Michael help in the form of a suit and some shoes. Since the addresses of families in need were kept secret from the public, the family accepted the offer through the welfare organization. But due to a small error, a mysterious woman learned the Maroney family's address. They had no idea that this seemingly insignificant mistake would trigger a tragic chain of events that would alter their lives for good. On May 14, 1930, Catherine Maroney, who was 17 years old at the time, was at home by herself with Mary Agnes and Anastasia. She heard a knock at the door as she was mopping the floor. When she goes to answer the door, a nicely dressed woman who identified herself as Mrs. Henderson and claimed to be a representative of the social worker who had seen the Maroney family's advertisement for assistance, was standing at the doorstep. She had just brought inside some groceries she had bought from the downstairs grocery store for $2.55. Mary Agnes, who was typically reserved, quickly warmed up to the woman as Catherine described their family's hardship to her. The woman appeared friendly and eager to assist while listening intently. She said her aging husband had passed away, leaving her with a sizable fortune. A child like Mary Agnes was something else she mentioned wanting. She then requested that Mary Agnes be temporarily taken to California with her while assuring Catherine that the young girl would be as chubby as a butterball. Catherine struggled to overcome her unease. She politely turned down the woman's sudden offer and the woman seemed to have accepted the mother's decision. The woman soon left and assured Catherine she would be back the following day. Catherine asked for her name and the woman reluctantly identified herself as Julia Otis. Julia gave Catherine $2 and 2 books before she left as a sign of support. The next day on May 14, 1930, even though it was raining, Julia Otis went back to the Maroney's house. She brought fresh baby clothes this time for Catherine, who was at the time expecting her third child. Later it was found that Julia had bought these clothes from a department store with a brand new $50 bill. She offered to drive Mary Agnes to a close-by shop so she could buy new clothes and shoes and claimed to have found her father a better job. Catherine reluctantly agreed to let Mary Agnes go with her because she was appreciative of the woman's generosity and thought of her as a blessing. Julia Otis took little Mary away and left in spite of her sobs and tantrums. The two, however, disappeared without a trace. Catherine and Michael turned to the police for assistance as they searched desperately for their beloved daughter. They searched for traces, but none were discovered. On the same evening, an elderly man in shabby clothing who claimed to be a welfare worker showed up at the Maroney home. Catherine reported him to the police because she was uncomfortable with his presence. The men tried to stop her from making the call through to the police, but failed, and eventually ran away. He was never identified or found. Julia Otis was described by Catherine as a pleasant and attractive woman, around the age of 22, standing at around 5 feet 2 inches tall, and weighing 125 pounds. She spoke with a refined voice and had visible front teeth. Julia was dressed in a gray suit, a gray lace hat, a pearl necklace, and a jeweled wristwatch when they last saw each other. At around 8 p.m. the following day, on May 16, a letter from Julia Otis arrived at the Maroney residence. The letter was written on letterhead, and the postmark on it showed that it was delivered at 4:30 p.m. It came with a $5 bill and was delivered via special delivery. The letter read, "Please don't be alarmed. I have taken your little girl to California with me. I have hired a special nurse to care for her. We'll be back in 2 months. By that time, you will be on your feet again and will be able to care for her. She didn't even cry a bit. She is outfitted like a princess. In the meantime, I'll help all I can to get you on your feet. Don't worry about anything else. When you get this letter, we'll be on our way already. As ever, Julia Otis." The authorities examined the letter and found that there were deliberate attempts to make the writing appear illiterate. Could the letter's author have been hiding their true educational background on purpose? As word of the letter spread, witnesses soon came forward with stories of a woman who resembled Julia's description. A young girl who resembled Mary Agnes and the woman were spotted together at a store. A witness saw the woman dictating a letter to a store employee. The Maroneys got a second letter from someone named Alice Henderson 2 weeks later. She claimed to be Julia Otis's cousin. Alice stated in her letter that Julia had lost both her husband and her child the year before, and so, she had been craving love since her tragic loss. Alice expressed her wish for Julia to change her mind and give Mary Agnes back. She then ceased all correspondence with the family. Authorities eventually found that both letters had identical handwriting. 4 days after Mary Agnes was kidnapped, on May 19, Catherine Maroney took matters into her own hands and asked a judge for a warrant, accusing Julia Otis of abducting her first fruit. Both the public and law enforcement were puzzled by this mysterious woman's abduction of Mary Agnes Maroney. In an effort to find any indication of the two boarding a train, the police searched all of Chicago's railroad stations. However, it appeared as though the two had disappeared with no single trace. A girl fitting Mary Agnes' description was spotted in Rockford, Illinois, on July 23, 1931. A 3-year-old white girl who resembled Mary Agnes in terms of tan skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes was seen in a cart being pushed by an elderly Native American woman named Martha Thompson. When the Maroneys were notified and showed up to identify the girl, Martha claimed that the girl had been abandoned by her mother, whose name was Florence Fuller, and that she was on her way to join a circus with the child. The young girl, according to Catherine, was not Mary Agnes. Catherine gave the girl a thorough examination. She made sure she wasn't her daughter by inspecting her teeth and body. Both parents were inconsolable when it dawned on them that the girl wasn't Mary Agnes. One thing that set Mary Agnes apart from the girl from Rockford was the red mark on her arm. The case of Mary Agnes's disappearance eventually became cold because the investigation yielded no meaningful leads. In the coming years, the Maroney family welcomed another child whom they named Catherine into the world. They then had the good fortune to welcome 5 more boys named Michael Jr., Patrick, George, Harold, and William. When other kids went missing, the media frequently ran stories about Mary Agnes, keeping her name in the public eye. When Chicago Daily News reporter Eden Wright came across a picture of the Maroney family, he noticed something important: all of the family members looked alike, which gave him the idea for a story. In an effort to get someone to recognize Mary Agnes, the Chicago Daily News worked with the California newspaper to publish photos of the Maroney family. Soon enough, a Californian man by the name of Everett McClellan came forward in 1952. The men claimed that Anastasia, one of Mary Agnes' sisters, looked so much like his wife that it might have been her picture. The woman, Mary McClellan, was 24 years old and had been adopted in 1930 by Charles and Nora Beck. The teeth, blood type, skull type, fingerprints, and handprints of Mary McClellan appeared to be identical to those of Mary Agnes. However, Mary McClellan lacked 2 things Mary Agnes had. Mary Agnes was born a year later than McClellan, and McClellan did not have Mary Agnes' distinctive hernia scar from a surgical procedure. The newspaper arranged a meeting between Mary McClellan and Catherine on September 4, 1952, but much to everyone's dismay, Catherine Maroney insisted that Mary McClellan was not her lost daughter. Regardless, the women developed a close bond over time. Ultimately, a DNA test carried out in 2008 after Mary McClellan's demise established that she was not Mary Agnes. Mary Agnes' parents, Catherine and Michael, were profoundly affected by the tragic disappearance of their daughter. Michael passed away in 1957 at the age of 58, leaving behind an extraordinary amount of pain brought on by the loss of his dearly loved daughter. Depression plagued Catherine for years as she was consumed by the pain of her daughter's disappearance. She was only 49 years old when she died in 1962, after she had endured her loss all the way to the end. For close to a century, Mary Agnes' case remained a mystery. When Cook County Sheriff's Detective, Jose Rodriguez, started looking into Mary Agnes's disappearance in 2022 and contacted Terry Arnold, the daughter of a woman he thought was the long-lost Mary Agnes Maroney, the case took a great turn. Detective Rodriguez thought Mary Agnes might actually be Terry's mother based on DNA evidence. When the detective first explained his hypothesis, that Jeanette Burchard might actually be Mary Agnes Maroney, to Terry Arnold, Terry was doubtful and didn't buy it. She emphasized the absence of Mary Agnes' birthmark and other distinguishing features in her mother. But Terry agreed to take a commercial DNA test in order to disprove the theory and offer concrete proof. On October 28, 2022, the test results were received, and they produced a startling finding. Her genetic makeup, in contrast to Terry's Polish heritage, predominantly revealed Irish ancestry, which was a notable similarity with the Maroney family. The DNA test also established Terry Arnold's relationship to the Maroney family's surviving members as first-line cousins. This coincidental relationship strengthened the notion that Terry's mother was Mary Agnes Maroney. Who was she, though? Her family had been informed that Jeanette Burchard was born on April 14, 1928. She was raised by Jeanette Soleric Darris Anderson and her stepfather, Frank Darris. Detective Rodriguez did not find any obvious abnormalities in Burchard's family during his investigation. However, Terry provided a crucial piece of information. Frank Darris, Terry's step-grandfather, once told Jeanette Burchard that the woman who raised her wasn't her biological mother. Terry also claimed that her mother attempted to find out more about her true ancestry by contacting her Chicago-based cousins, but they claimed to be unaware of the situation. However, it was later discovered that before getting married to Frank Darris, the woman who raised Jeanette had a brief relationship with a man by the name of John Fahey. Fahey and the woman, along with Jeanette Burchard, were listed as residing in the same Chicago home in the 1930 census. After getting married to Darris, the family moved to Virginia in the early 1930s. Later, during World War II, they moved to Florida. Jeanette Burchard wed Edward Jennings in the 1940s, and the two of them had two children named Barbara Joan Jennings and Edward Clifton Jennings, Jr. After starting her career as a nurse, Jeanette gave birth to Terry Arnold, her third child, in 1957. A few decades later, she wed Earl Burchard a second time. The Miami Dolphins were Jeanette's favorite team, and she supported them from the time they were founded in 1966 throughout her entire life. Jeanette was a nurse, but she also had a great love for animals, especially dogs and cats. She also loved opera, with Madame Butterfly being a particular favorite. According to Terry, the last time her mother visited Chicago was probably between 1989 and 1995, possibly for a funeral. She later died in Florida in 2003, and her remains were buried alongside her pets. A year later, her son, Edward Clifton Jennings Jr. died. Her daughter, Barbara Joan Jennings, soon passed away in 2006 too. Terry Arnold is, however, the only surviving child of Jeanette Burchard, and she is certain that Mary Agnes Maroney is indeed her mother, whom she knows as Jeanette Burchard. In an interview, Terry admitted that she didn't know anything about the name Julia Otis or how her grandmother ended up raising her mother, Jeanette Burchard. Terry is still oblivious to the circumstances surrounding this mystery. However, she acknowledged that Mary Agnes' parents never received closure or knew the truth about what really happened to their daughter and expressed sympathy and sadness for them. Terry assured the Maroney family that Jeanette Burchard, or Mary Agnes as Terry knew her, was dearly loved despite the unanswered questions. Mary Agnes Maroney was the subject of a decades-long, relentless search in 1930. The horrific chapter that has plagued the Maroney family's generations for almost a century has finally come to an end as of this year 2023. But there was still one unanswered question: who was Julia Otis, and what motivated her to kidnap young Mary Agnes from her loving family? We will never be able to know some of these responses.
When a clown appeared in front of Marlene Warren's door and presented her with flowers and balloons, she didn't know that the clown was a killer with a gun hidden away in the costume. For over 3 decades, the case of the killer clown remained a mystery to detectives, Florida residents, and true crime enthusiasts all over the world. Marlene Warren was born on the 15th of April, 1950. When she turned 22, she married Michael Warren, who was 19 years old at the time. Marlene already had 2 children from her previous marriage, and Michael appeared to consider her 2 young sons to be his own. The couple grew together, working hard and making a name for themselves. They bought a number of companies, including a used car dealership for Michael. The family was able to maintain a reasonable standard of living because of their several revenue streams. Life for them was like a bed of roses, such that they could afford a 500-square-foot house in Wellington, Florida's upscale Aero Club neighborhood. Each of the homes in this area have their own runway and hangar, which enabled residents to fly their private aircraft whenever they like. The Warrens appeared to have it all, yet this was not the case at all. At his auto dealership in 1983, Michael experienced legal troubles. Customers accused him of fiddling with the odometer, and the authorities arrested him. He was consequently given an 18-month probationary period. By the year 1990, it was widely known that the Warrens were experiencing marital issues. Michael was allegedly having an affair with Sheila Keene, one of his staff. Despite Sheila and Michael's denials to these allegations, Sheila's husband decided to leave her. On May 26, 1990, a white Chrysler LeBaron with no license plate traveled down the street where Michael and Marlene lived. Marlene and a friend were in the kitchen when they saw a clown-costumed person approach the front door with a basket of flowers and balloons. Marlene grew up in a clown-loving family. Her family adored clowns so much that her mother keeps a whole room filled with clown collectibles. She had paintings of clowns that 14-year-old Marlene had created. For the adoration of clowns, Marlene hurried to the front door to welcome her visitor. Her son, Joseph Aarons, who was present at the time, recalled hearing his mother comment, "How pretty." This appeared to have been Marlene's last words, because a short while afterwards, everyone in the house, including Joseph's friends who came visiting, heard a pop sound. At first they thought the noise was a balloon popping, but then they noticed Marlene tumbling to the ground. Now at alert, everyone sped to the door. The balloons and flowers were left behind as the clown nonchalantly made his way back to the white Chrysler LeBaron. Joseph tried to run after the clown, but he couldn't go as far because he had a cast on his leg. He, however, remembered screaming at the clown to turn around. The clown turned and gave him a wide-eyed brown stare. Its face lacked any expression. The clown soon climbed the white LeBaron and sped off. The sole description offered by witnesses was that Marlene had been shot by a clown with brown eyes. Even the gender of the clown was a mystery to them. Joseph and one of his friends had tried to follow the clown in their own car, but they lost track of it. Marlene Warren was rushed to the hospital. It was determined that she had been shot twice in the face at point-blank range. She struggled to survive but died 2 days later at the hospital. Detectives checked in with Michael Warren, who wasn't home at the time of the incident. Michael had a solid alibi. He got the terrible news while en route to a Miami racetrack with friends. He hastily went back home to offer comfort to the family. When questioned by the detectives, he provided as much information, cooperating with the investigation process. He was soon ruled out as a suspect. The authorities were perplexed. According to a spokesman for the Palm Beach County Sheriff, the killer clown case was the strangest thing he had ever seen in all of his 19 years working as a law enforcement agent. 2 hours after the murder, authorities got a solid tip. A caller who wished to remain unnamed suggested that the police should thoroughly question Michael Warren and Sheila Keene. Before the police could ask her any more questions, she hung up. Sheila Keene was in town at the time of the murder, but Michael was traveling with friends. Sheila claimed to have been at work, but in reality, she was a repo person for Michael's dealership. Her alibi wasn't exactly solid. A few days after Marlene Warren's killer clown case made headlines, 2 employees of the neighborhood costume store named The Spotlight reported a weird experience to the police. They claimed that one woman with chocolate brown hair came up to them just as they were about to lock up the store. She pleaded to be allowed inside. The employees informed her that they were closed and advised her to come back the following day. She, however, was persistent and informed them that she really needed a costume that evening. It was a strange request because it wasn't Halloween. It was almost Labor Day weekend. Regardless, the 2 employees were sympathetic and allowed her enter the store. She was claimed to have bought white makeup, a red nose, white gloves, an orange afro wig, and a clown outfit. Later on in the investigation, the 2 employees selected Sheila Keene from a lineup of photos and declared that they were fairly certain that she was the woman who showed up begging to buy a clown costume. The detectives soon looked into the supermarket store that sold the flowers and balloons the clown had brought to Marlene's house. It was discovered that the supermarket was close to Sheila Keene's house at the time. Also, the supermarket staff selected Sheila from a lineup of photos. The white Chrysler LeBaron, the getaway vehicle, came into consideration next. When asked, Michael Warren asserted that he had no knowledge of the vehicle. He claimed only Chevrolets were sold at his dealership, but Payless, his main rival, had a Chrysler LeBaron. Michael and Payless had a history of disagreements, especially over an advertisement that Michael's dealership ran that included the phrase Payless and was purported to be an attempt to confuse buyers. One time, a client from outside the area rented a white Chrysler LeBaron from Payless. The customer searched up Payless's number when it was time to return the car, but ended up contacting Michael's dealership instead. The client said they were instructed to park the vehicle outside the dealership with the keys inside the sun visor. The LeBaron, however, later vanished. After the murder, the getaway vehicle used by the clown was abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. During their search, police discovered orange synthetic threads in the vehicle that resembled a clown wig strands. They also discovered brown long hairs. Sheila Keene had long brown hair at the time of the murder. The police found more orange fake hair strands inside her residence during a search warrant. At this point, everything seemed like a simple situation to resolve. But that wasn't the case. Michael and Sheila vehemently denied being involved in Marlene's murder. They refuted having a conversation with the police without the presence of a lawyer. DNA testing was just getting started in 1990, so the investigators' available evidence was circumstantial. The investigation into Marlene's murder was abandoned, but Michael's legal issues intensified. During the course of the investigation into the murder, Michael's unlawful business dealings came to light. Police discovered proof of additional odometer tampering and consumer overcharging. Following the arrest of an employee, Michael surrendered himself to the police. In 1992, Michael's case went to trial, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. After being released in 2002, Michael married Sheila Keene a few years later. The couple started a new life in Tennessee by operating a restaurant. Sheila changed her name to Debbie and informed the community that it was a childhood nickname. Michael must be a good businessman because his new restaurant was a success. The couple's success allowed them to settle in Heron Point, a posh neighborhood close to the Virginia-Tennessee border. They made lots of friends and fit in well with their new neighbors. Few locals were familiar with their history. Michael told their new community that he has owned restaurants since he was a teenager. Marlene Warren's demise benefited Michael as well. He was the beneficiary of Marlene's life insurance policy, not her son. He took over $50,000 from Marlene's family, leaving them with virtually nothing. Detectives had their suspicions, but there was no concrete proof on ground. Michael and Sheila were immediately suspected of the crime, but a grand jury was never convened to that effect. Earlier in the investigation, the police were informed by Michael's acquaintances that they had seen arguments between him and Marlene, and that Marlene had questioned Sheila about her and Michael's affair. Above all, they claimed Michael didn't seem overly saddened by Marlene's passing. Detectives knew they merely needed to fit the puzzle pieces together, because there were many of them. DNA was the case's linchpin. Police took blood and hair samples from Sheila in 1990, but they lacked the equipment to analyze them. Over 25 years passed as the samples rested in a cooler. Police were able to reactivate Marlene Warren's cold case in 2013, thanks to a federal grant they were able to obtain. They had previously tried DNA testing, but the results were inconclusive. Fortunately, technology has improved and produced sufficient evidence to charge Sheila for Marlene's murder. In September 2017, Michael and Sheila were stopped by authorities 5 minutes away from their home. They were unaware that Marlene Warren's cold case had been reopened. 27 years after the murder, the police informed them that an arrest warrant had been issued for Sheila Keene Warren. Michael Warren still maintains that neither he nor Sheila are involved. In an interview, when questioned if he was involved in the killing of his first wife, Michael replied with, "Definitely not." He further said he wouldn't have been with Sheila if he thought she had anything to do with Marlene's murder. A lawyer named Christopher DeSantis told detectives about a fascinating chat he had with Michael Warren before Marlene was killed. DeSantis claimed that Michael had questioned him about what would happen, theoretically speaking, if a husband murdered his wife. He recalled telling Michael that the husband would escape punishment if a friend of his committed the murder, and there was no way to connect the husband to the friend. Intriguingly, DeSantis also recalled telling Michael that if someone was dressed as a clown, they would get away with it, because it would be impossible to identify them. Despite this, the evidence isn't sufficient for the police to accuse Michael Warren of killing his wife Marlene. Marlene's son Joseph Aarons, who was a teenager at the time of his mother's death, remembered it as one of the worst days of his life. He expressed his desire for justice in an interview, but he would not specify whether he thought Michael was somehow involved in his mother's death. Sheila was locked away for 5 years before her trial commenced. During those times, she and Michael's love endured. They wrote each other several letters. After trial, Sheila Keene pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was given 12 years in prison.